Mind Over Matter, where we explore the tools that transform pain into power and healing into heritage. Today's guest, Tashia Martin, is a powerhouse of wisdom, a licensed social worker, author of New Leaf, and the founder of Restoring Legacy. Her work blends ancestral knowledge with systematic strategy, using the five elements as anchors for healing. If you're navigating change, grief, or growth, this conversation might just turn a page in your own story. Welcome to the show, Tasha. It's an honor to have you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
hmm So, Tasha, your book, New Leaf, beautifully integrates the five elements into emotional healing. How did this elemental approach first come into your life?
So I've always been really curious about the elements, but it wasn't until my grief experience. I lost about 15 people from 2022 to 2024. Over 15 people died in my life. And so I went through a very traumatic spiritual experience that made me very afraid to be still and to connect with some of the practices that I had done in the past. And so I ended up going to therapy and started working with a spiritual coach who helped me to take more control over the gift that I had around with my spirituality. And then I was able to tap back into the elements. And so some of the things I had already been doing with earth, with water, water has always been a conduit for me. And it's always been super important during my meditation practices that I engage with water. And so then it just made me really start to explore the other elements of air, fire, and ether.
That's amazing. And
Thank you. Mhm.
and why do you think these elements resonate so deeply across both ancient traditions and modern healing?
So I think because we've become so accustomed to the hustle and bustle of life, we've forgotten that our ancestors and our elders already engaged with various practices that incorporate the use of herbs, which is earth related, right? That would have us go and sit by the water to help release our emotional, any uneasy emotions that we're experiencing. We forget that our elders and our ancestors would go and sit outside and just feel the breeze of the air and the sun. So these things we've forgotten, but they're in our DNA. They're already within us that we just have to become aware of them again. And so when I think about just the ancestral and the historical components of the elements and how we're all connected to them in a different way, and then I think about my social work practice, which I'm trained in trauma informed practices and really responding to engaging in practices that help to activate the parasympathetic nervous system and calm us down when we're very stressed. Starting to really integrate those things and understand that there are some components of evidence-based psychology and mental health that connect back to the ancient practices of our elders. And so I noticed things such as grounding techniques. When our mind is wandering or we feel very anxious or we're really worried about things, there are different strategies that help to bring us into the present so that we are no longer so attached to what has us worried, but we're shifting our focus from what's worrying us to something that is more grounding. And so when you think about the evidence-based practices that are scientifically studied, there's always some connection back to what our ancestors have practiced historically. So there, so it's familiar to all of us. We just based on your training or your experiences in life, you may not see the alignment, but there's a lot of alignment between the two.
It's like the earth, water, fire, air, and space are not just around us, but within us, shaping how we rise, rest, and renew.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that that's something I really wanted folks to connect with is that it is within us. Our body is made mostly of water. And so when we engage in a practice such as speaking affirming words into our water, so taking a glass of water and saying, speaking directly into it, this water is going to bring abundance for me. This water brings calmness to me. This water brings ease and joy to my life. And then you ingest that water, you take that water in, you're literally filling your insides with the words that you just stated, because water is a conduit. All these things are connected.
Absolutely. And you work across systems and people. How do the elements show up differently when healing a person versus transforming a cultural or institution?
So I think when I'm working with individuals and institutions, I like to let leaders know that it's like the spokes on a wheel. And so if one component of the wheel is broken, then you have a flat tire. It doesn't run as smoothly. And so when we're thinking about our systems, we can't think about the systems without thinking about the people who make the system move and operate. And so I like to work with leaders to first become aware of where they are in their own healing journey. Because as individuals, if we're in pain and we're hurting, we show up and we inflict that pain on others if we lack the awareness, because we're not taking action to help ourselves feel better. And so unfortunately, when folks are, they say hurt people. And so when folks are not feeling at their best, they bring that into every room that they're in. And so starting off with our own self-awareness, and then getting into practices that will help us manage how we are feeling emotionally so we can improve our emotional state, and so that we can also improve our patterns and processes that will have us believe that things cannot be better, or that the situation is the worst in the world. And so when we start with our own self-awareness and getting to strategies that will help us manage how we're feeling and what we're thinking, then we show up into the system better. And when we can do that as leaders, or, and when I say leaders, I don't necessarily mean you are the manager of a company. You can be the head of your household, right? You can be a parent. You can be an elder in the family. You can be a friend that others come to for wisdom. So leadership doesn't necessarily mean a title. It can be more so relational. And so when we're aware of ourselves, then we can go into the system and start to say, how do we fix this system so that everyone is operating in from their best capacity, because everyone is well. So it's, when I think about working with people, systems, and organizations, I'm really thinking about the wellness of the people who make the things move, and also making sure that we have a alignment in what we're doing, and making sure that that alignment is also from a place of our values, what we believe, and what our mission is. And then we also get into a space of being able to be action oriented, because we're all moving in alignment with each other.
Mm-hmm, 100%. And is there a particular element you see being out of balance in today's social or organizational systems?
I think we're often out of alignment with Earth. I think a lot of folks we overactivate with fire, because we think we have to move and take action so quickly. And so we're often out of alignment with Earth. I will also say we're also a little bit out of alignment with our emotional state, which is connected to water. And so those would be the two areas that I think folks need to spend a little bit more time on, is getting grounded and connected to our present, and not worrying about taking action so much. And then also being vulnerable enough to have compassion for ourselves and our emotional state, which is the water element.
That's such a profound perspective. Healing isn't just personal, it's collective. When systems are fractured, people bleed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We are all connected. And it, depending on where you live and what community you're from, you're you can be in a space that focuses on the individual, right? And right now, I live in United States of America, in New Jersey, and United States is a very individualistic country. However, when I think about where my ancestors are from, where some of my elders are from, the Caribbean and African countries, it's more community focused. And so there's this term that is African centered, and it's Ubuntu. And Ubuntu means I am because we are. And that means that if I am hurting, you can't possibly be well because we're all in the same community. And so if one community member is hurting, then the other members are hurting as well. But on the flip side, if a community member is doing well, then we should all be doing well. And we have to make sure that we're taking care of one another. And so that is the collective aspect of healing. And most countries are operate from a collective system, but oftentimes we come from a background of collectivism, but we're operating in a space that is very individualistic. And so there's this tug of war between who you are and who you have to be in the current space, which can be very competitive, and distracting and disorienting from who you are by nature.
Definitely. And your leadership framework, Ripple Effect, is rooted in healing and equity. How do the five elements support that ripple of transformation in real life?
So the ripple effects came from this idea that when we change ourselves, we can impact others. And when we see clearly that every individual has a gift and an offering to the community, then we can value one another in a better way. And so, ripple effect leadership says, I see you, I support you, and I care about who you are, who you're becoming. And that is how you create the ripple and the legacy. Because when I care for you, I know that you extend that same kindness to others. And so in my leadership, I like to really invest in my staff members. I like to know what is their professional goal, what is their personal goal, because when they're interacting with me, this is just one step in life. It is the first step, is a phase. We may not be together forever in this same capacity. And so I always want my staff members to know that they should soar, and I'm going to be a cheerleader for them, because when I'm supporting them, I know that they're going to give their best. They're going to give their best in the work that we're doing together. So I'm really invested in that. And then the way it is connected to the elements is when I facilitate a meeting, a strategy meeting, I am sure to bring in items such as eucalyptus oil because it's a very clarifying and calming oil. And eucalyptus oil can help with easing the brain in a way that the brain is better prepared and activated to work and to be structured in a healthy conversation. So I'll bring different oils into my meetings. I will take time to do breathing techniques and exercises with my team because I want them to feel calm. When you have a calm mind and a calm body, your brain can function a lot better to solve problems. The other thing that I'll do is I will have meetings outside and have us sit in the grass so that we are always connected and grounded with earth. And when it comes to water, I will bring water into every single meeting so that my team can stay hydrated. So there's different activities and steps that you can take to stay connected to the elements while leading, and also honoring the work that your organization has to get done, but also recognizing and acknowledging the value of the people who are doing the work.
Yeah, that's great. And can you share a moment where someone or a group experienced a shift through this elemental integration?
Yeah, so I think about a time when one of my we were in an executive leadership meeting. I was at at a leadership meeting with my CEO, and with my other colleagues who are executive leaders as well. And we were talking about some of our goals that we recently had not met. And as you can imagine, when you don't meet your goals, that is a very frustrating part, of the work, and it can create tension between the relationship. And so during that meeting, it was very important to say, you know what, we need to take a pause, so that we recognize that we all respect each other, we all care about each other, and we really care about this work, but right now we need a pause. And so it's in that moment that I'll bring out an oil and I'll pass around the oil and we take an inhale. And we'll take a pause also to state words of affirmations. And affirmations are super important as well because they allow us to reprogram our brain and tap into the brain's tap into the brain's neuroplasticity so that we can shift the way we're thinking about the situation in ourselves. And so taking that pause is super important to bring in different techniques such as the eucalyptus oil that I named, or even bringing in frankincense oil. That's another oil. Also bringing in water again. And so just being aware and taking that pause with your team members to say we need to reset. You can always bring in one of the elements. And from there, what I noticed is that we were able to find joy again and reset ourselves and recognize that each person in here cared about each other and cares about the work. So it prevented us from getting into a very toxic space and coming back to a space of wellness.
I love that your work brings it full circle from I am to we are. Healing multiplies when rooted in relationship.
Yes, yes. And it's so important, a lot of times, again, thinking about being in a competitive environment, we often forget that others are also struggling or navigating who they are. And life is a journey. And so who we were yesterday is not necessarily who we are today or who we even want to be tomorrow. And when we acknowledge that and recognize that we're all on a path, we can have more compassion for each other and for ourselves. And I think there's also a level of vulnerability that has to take place when you're engaged in this work, because there's going to be days when you're great and there's going to be days when you are feeling your lowest. And if your team members don't know that you are going through something, then they don't have the understanding that your behavior or your distance is not related to them or any relational things between the two of you, but more so something that you're coping with yourself. And so being very transparent and vulnerable with others helps them to understand that you are working through your I am, but you still want to be a part of the we are, because we're absolutely all connected. And so if I show up here today and I have a funky attitude and I'm being mean to you, you can internalize that and that affects how you show up. And so it's really important that we're honest with ourselves and each other, and that we give one another grace, and that we also give ourselves the grace we need to navigate major life changes, such as a new child coming into the home, such as having to move and relocate, and even thinking about different community challenges that might be facing, such as disasters, natural disasters. There was just a tsunami the other day. So these are community events that are impacting how we show up as people. And when we are vulnerable enough to say that these situations are affecting us, then we can have a little bit more compassion and awareness for one another.
Absolutely. And grief is a tender space. How can people use the elements to hold their grief gently and allow it to guide renewal rather than collapse?
So one of the chapters in my book, Ether, it is connected to this cultural idea. In my culture, we say that the body may die, but the spirit continues to live on. And so from the element of ether, it is an experience of recognizing the eternal and infinite relationship that we can have with the people who we love, who may not physically be here with us in the physical space, but they're still with us in the spiritual space. And so one thing that I like to do, that people who are grieving the death of a loved one, is I use the element of water to wash myself of any guilt that I may be feeling of my grief process. Sometimes people want us to grieve faster. They want us to get over it. They want us to move on and get back to normal. But when someone that you love dies, your life is never the same again. There is no normal. You're now entering into a new space that you have to learn how to navigate and function from. And so when we think about the elements, ether will allow us to engage in the honoring of our ancestor. It will allow us to take joy in the things that they once took joy in and keep us still connected to them. We can use earth element to bring us down, bring us back to earth and grounding and feeling more aware of what's going on with us. We can also use the elements of air to just address our thinking around this loss that we just experienced. And so instead of feeling horrible about this person dying in our life, we can get to a space of acceptance, even though it's really difficult to understand that these folks are gone. But we can get into a space of acceptance and rethink what this relationship can look like with them. And so one thing that I like to do is one of my grandmothers died when I was 3 years old. So I don't really remember her physically, but I know she's with me. I have a photo of her. I remember that her favorite candy was this yellow piece of candy that she would always bring to church. And so from time to time, I will find this yellow candy, which is rarely sold in stores anymore. And I will have a piece of candy and share one with her as well. And so we're thinking about the elements in a way that help to recenter us and rethink how we navigate the grief process. And so, these things are super important when we're talking about grieving the loss of a loved one.
Hmm, definitely. And which element do you personally turn to most in your own moments of loss or transition?
I absolutely turn to ether. I absolutely turn to ether during loss and transition, because it's really important that I'm holding space for the weight of the loss, but also recognizing that the light still flickers within me and that I don't lose myself. It's very easy to lose yourself when you are grieving because grief changes us, death changes us, loss changes us. And sometimes we can lose ourselves, and that means that we can lose hope. And it's important that we don't lose hope and that we don't lose sight of the power that we have within us to continue on. And so the other thing about the element of ether is that it also connects to I like to connect with my throat chakra and my crown chakra during this time, because sometimes we can lose our voice during this time because we're confused about what's going on, and we may not have the words. And so we develop this blockage in our communication. And so I like to really be intentional to exercise my voice and to say that there is beauty on the other side of this terrible, awful experience that I may be going through. It also helps me to anchor and affirm that life life will continue, and that the folks that I'm with are still with me, and that even when I am, let's say I'm transitioning and leaving one job to go to another job, those relationships I had at work don't have to end. They just transform, and it looks differently, but these relationships can still exist in a way that is supportive of my journey.
That's so relatable because sometimes grief isn't asking to be fixed, it's just felt fully and safely.
Absolutely. And that's what ether teaches us. Ether doesn't ask us to move on. It asks us to move with. So we want to move with love. We want to move with memory. We want to move with reverence of the beauty that exists in the relationships that we had.
Mhm, right. And in a time when noise is constant and pace is punishing, Tasha invites us back to nature, back to rhythm, and back to ourselves. New Leaf isn't just a journal, it's a mirror, a map, and a medicine. So, wherever you are in your healing journey, remember this: your elements are not broken, They're waiting. All you have to do is begin.
Thank you for having me and for making space for your audience members to welcome their healing journey, and to tap into the elements which we're all connected to.